She apologized for being dirty, but the man in line recognized her voice. "Welcome back and enjoy the story." She stood there, her back slightly hunched, shoulders trembling beneath a worn-out sweater too thin for April. Her hands were cracked from detergent, and the plastic bag of rice in her arms pressed tightly against her chest as if it were the last piece of dignity she still had. "Don't cry now," she told herself, blinking rapidly. "Not in front of them, not here, not again." She took one slow breath. The stench of sweat from the long walk clung to her skin. She had tried to wash her face in the restroom of the community shelter, but the sink was broken again. She had walked for almost 2 hours. Her legs ached. Her shoes were split at the toes, her coat was stained and old, a donation from a church that no longer knew her name. The woman behind her coughed. Someone else moved slightly away. She knew why. She heard the murmurs. She saw the side glances, the tightened jaws, the way people shifted just enough to make her feel like her presence was an offense. So she lowered her head and whispered softly, brokenly, to no one in particular, and to everyone at once. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend anyone. I needed to buy this rice. It's all I can afford today. My daughter, she asked me last night, 'Mama, do we have anything left for dinner tomorrow?' And I smiled and said yes. I lied, because I couldn't let her go to sleep scared." She could feel the sting behind her eyes. She bit her tongue. "I know I smell like the street. I know my clothes don't belong in a place like this. But I used to be someone. I used to sit in rooms full of children and read to them. My voice was strong back then. I had stories in my heart, warmth in my hands. I was a light for others. But life doesn't care who you used to be. Life strips you down piece by piece. First your job, then your home, then your friends, then even your name begins to sound strange in your own mouth. Now I'm just a number at the food bank. A face to avoid. A whisper on the bus. A smell in the grocery store. And still I keep walking. I keep showing up. Because I have a daughter who thinks I'm magic, who still believes her mama can fix anything." Her voice cracked with the effort not to cry. She glanced down at the rice, then at the people who wouldn't meet her eyes. "I don't want your pity. I just want to be allowed to stand here without shame. I just want to be human again. I want someone to remember me. Not like this, but how I was, how I am, inside." Then, just as she felt the tears push past the barrier of her strength, she heard it. A voice. A man, trembling. "It's you." She turned slowly. His eyes were wide, filled with disbelief, filled with something she hadn't seen in years. Recognition. "You used to read to us at the shelter. You told me I mattered. I never forgot your voice. I would have ended up in prison or dead. But your stories, they saved me." She couldn't speak. He took a step forward. "I've been looking for you for years. I became a writer. Because of you. That voice. It brought me back to life." And in that moment, in that aisle, in that silence, everything she thought she had lost returned to her in the most unexpected form. Not as charity, but as honor. The fluorescent lights of the corner grocery store hummed quietly overhead, casting a harsh glow on Teresa Martin's weathered face. At 43, she looked at least a decade older. The fine lines around her eyes etched deep with worry and fatigue. She clutched the small bag of rice tighter to her chest, uncertain if the encounter was real or simply another desperate hallucination born from too many sleepless nights. The man before her, tall and well-dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slate-grey slacks, continued to stare, his expression shifting from shock to something softer, something that made Teresa want to both hide and be seen all at once. "My name is Kevin," he said, extending a hand that bore the calluses of someone who'd known hard work despite his current polished appearance. "Kevin Brown. You probably don't remember me. I was 12, skinny as a rail, angry at everything. My mom and I stayed at the New Horizons shelter in Chicago for almost 8 months. Teresa's mind raced backward through the fog of years, through the blur of faces she'd once known, before homelessness, before her daughter, before everything fell apart. "Story lady?" she whispered, the old title feeling strange on her tongue. That's what the children called me. Kevin's smile widened, revealing a slight gap between his front teeth that triggered an unexpected flash of memory. A boy with that same gap, sitting cross-legged on a threadbare carpet, eyes wide as she read about magical wardrobes and talking lions. You remembered Tuesday nights, he continued, his voice growing steadier. No matter what, rain, snow, holiday, you were there with your canvas bag full of books. You'd sit in that awful plastic chair with the wobbly leg and read to us for hours. The cashier cleared her throat pointedly. Teresa startled, suddenly aware that they were holding up the line. I need to pay, she stammered, fumbling in her pocket for the crumpled bills she'd collected from returning bottles and cans. $5.37. Everything she had. Let me, Kevin said quickly, reaching for his wallet. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. Please, I need to do this myself. Understanding flickered across his face. He nodded and stepped back, giving her space as she carefully counted out the money, painfully aware of her dirty fingernails against the worn bills. The cashier, a teenager with pink-streaked hair and an expression of practiced boredom, barely looked at Teresa as she took the money, dropped the change into her palm, and tossed the receipt in the general direction of the grocery bag. Thank you, Teresa murmured, though the girl had already turned to the next customer. She shuffled toward the exit, certain that the encounter with Kevin would end there. Another brief connection lost to the relentless current of her circumstances. But as she pushed through the glass door into the crisp April afternoon, she heard footsteps behind her. Mrs. Martin, Kevin called. Please wait. Teresa paused, adjusting her grip on the rice. She didn't turn immediately. Couldn't bear to see pity replace the wonder in his eyes once he got a closer look at what she had become. I meant what I said, he continued, catching up to her. Your stories saved me. And not just me. There were others. Jamie, Darnell. The twins, what were their names? Sophia and Sylvia, Teresa supplied automatically, the names rising from some protected corner of her memory. The girls who always wanted to act out the stories afterward. Kevin laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Yes, and Darnell would get so annoyed because they always made him play the villain. A smile, her first real one in weeks, tugged at the corners of Teresa's lips. He secretly loved it. He was quite the dramatic 12-year-old. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the distance between their lives stretching between them like a chasm. Teresa fidgeted with the plastic bag handle, suddenly conscious of how her untidy appearance contrasted with Kevin's polished professionalism. Mrs. Martin, Kevin began again, his tone careful but direct. I don't want to pry, but are you— He hesitated, searching for the right words. Are you and your daughter okay? The simple question unlocked something in Teresa's chest. Dam of pride and shame that had held back the truth for too long. Words spilled out before she could stop them. We're surviving, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. After my husband died, the medical bills took everything. I lost my teaching position when the school district downsized. We managed in a cheap apartment for a while, but then the building was sold for redevelopment. We've been unhoused for about 7 months now. She forced herself to meet his gaze, expecting the familiar shift, that subtle recoil that happened when people realized they were speaking to someone who slept in shelters and washed in public restrooms. But Kevin's eyes remained steady, his expression serious but unguarded. My daughter Lily, she's 9, Teresa continued, gaining strength. Smart as a whip. She still goes to school. The district has a program for— She swallowed. For children experiencing homelessness. She doesn't tell her friends. She says we're just going through a temporary situation. Kevin nodded, his eyes now shining with unshed tears. Where are you staying tonight? We alternate between shelters, Teresa explained. Tonight we're at Grace Haven if they have space. If not, there's an all-night diner where the manager lets us sit until morning if we buy a cup of coffee. She hadn't meant to reveal so much. The words just kept coming like water through a broken pipe. She clutched the rice bag tighter, as if it could anchor her to what little dignity remained. Mrs. Martin, Kevin said softly, I'm the managing editor at Lakeside Publishing now. We have a foundation that supports literacy programs throughout the city. We've been looking for someone to coordinate our Reading Futures initiative. Teresa blinked, uncertain where this was heading. I've been interviewing candidates for weeks, he continued, gaining momentum. But none of them have what we need. Someone who truly understands the power of stories to change lives. Someone who's been there. A bus rumbled past, spewing exhaust into the cool air. Teresa coughed, using the moment to gather her thoughts. Was he offering her charity? A handout dressed up as opportunity? She'd had enough of both to recognize the bitter taste they left. I appreciate the thought, Kevin, she began carefully, but I couldn't possibly— This isn't charity, he interrupted as if reading her mind. This is business. Good business. I need someone with real experience, someone passionate enough to build this program from the ground up. The position pays $45,000 to start, with benefits after 90 days. The figure knocked the breath from Teresa's lungs. It was more than she'd made as a teaching assistant, even at her highest salary before the cuts. I don't understand, she said finally. You don't even know if I'm qualified. Kevin smiled. That gap-toothed smile that had once belonged to a scared 12-year-old boy seeking refuge in her stories. I know exactly how qualified you are. You already did this job once for free, because it mattered to you. Imagine what you could accomplish with actual resources behind you. Teresa's mind raced with possibilities. An apartment with running water, new shoes for Lily, grocery trips without counting pennies, but doubt quickly followed. My resume has a 7-month gap. I haven't had a permanent address. My clothes— She gestured helplessly at her worn attire. All solvable problems, Kevin replied with quiet confidence. The foundation has an emergency grant program for employees facing hardship. We can arrange temporary housing while you get on your feet. As for clothes, he shrugged. The office is business casual anyway. The absurdity of the situation suddenly struck Teresa, and a sound that was half laugh, half sob escaped her lips. This morning I was figuring out how to make $5 feed my daughter for 2 days, and now you're offering me a job. Kevin's expression grew solemn. Life takes away, Mrs. Martin. Sometimes piece by piece, like you said, but sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, it gives back all at once. Through the blur of unexpected tears, Teresa could see something in Kevin's eyes that she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope that had sustained her these past months, but something sturdier, a bridge across that chasm between their lives, built of shared memories and second chances. I don't know what to say, she admitted finally. Say you'll come to the office tomorrow, Kevin replied, reaching into his wallet and producing a business card. 9 a.m. I'll tell security to expect you. Teresa took the card with trembling fingers, reading the embossed lettering that confirmed everything he'd told her. Kevin Brown, managing editor, Lakeside Publishing. Bring your daughter after school, he added. We have a children's reading. Room she might enjoy while we talk details. A gust of wind swept down the street, carrying the scent of rain. Teresa clutched the business card as if it might blow away, this fragile promise of something better. Thank you, she said finally, the words wholly inadequate for the lifeline he'd extended. Kevin smiled again, warm and genuine. No, Mrs. Martin, thank you, for reminding a scared kid that stories can save us. It's about time someone returned the favor. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. Teresa walked in a daze toward the bus stop, Kevin's business card securely tucked in her pocket, alongside the meager change from her rice purchase. The weight of possibility pressed against her chest, making it difficult to breathe. Hope was a dangerous thing when you'd learn to live without it. Hope could destroy you when it inevitably disappeared. The number 42 bus arrived with the hydraulics. Hiss, its doors folding open like an invitation. Teresa climbed aboard, nodding at the driver, a heavy-set woman with kind eyes who had let her ride without full fare more than once over these difficult months. Evening, Teresa, the driver said, glancing at the small grocery bag. That all you got today? It's enough, Teresa replied, dropping her coins into the fare box. We'll manage. She made her way to an empty seat near the back, cradling the rice in her lap. The bus lurched forward, carrying her toward Grace Haven Shelter, where Lily would be waiting after her school's extended day program. Teresa leaned her forehead against the cool window glass, watching the city slide past in a blur of concrete and neon. Could she trust this sudden turn of events? Could she allow herself to believe that a chance encounter in a grocery store might actually change everything? The practical part of her, the part forged by months of hardship, whispered warnings. Nothing came this easily. There would be a catch, a disappointment, another fall. But there was Kevin's face, the wonder in his eyes when he recognized her voice, the genuine respect in his tone when he spoke of her previous work. Not pity, respect. The bus turned onto Lambert Avenue, the neighborhood growing visibly more worn with each block. Graffiti-tagged buildings stood shoulder to shoulder with boarded-up storefronts. On the corner, a group of teenagers huddled in the shadow of a liquor store, hands buried in pockets, eyes watchful. This was her world now, a place where survival meant keeping your head down, your voice low, your expectations lower. She'd fought hard to shield Lily from the worst of it, constructing elaborate stories about their adventure, while searching for a new home, pretending that sleeping on shelter cots was just an extended camping trip. But Lily was smart. Too smart to be fooled completely. Last week, she'd caught her daughter carefully rationing her school lunch, tucking half of her sandwich into her backpack for later. When confronted, Lily had simply shrugged and said, "I thought you might be hungry, Mama." The memory stung Teresa's eyes with fresh tears. Her daughter was learning lessons no child should have to learn, about hunger, about sacrifice, about pretending everything was fine when nothing was. The bus slowed to a stop 3 blocks from Grace Haven. Teresa disembarked, nodding goodbye to the driver, and began the final leg of her journey on foot. The April evening had turned cool, the thin sweater offering little protection against the spring chill. She walked quickly, eyes scanning her surroundings out of habit, rice bag clutched close. Grace Haven occupied a renovated church building, its stone facade softened by window boxes, filled with pansies planted by volunteers. The stained glass windows, remnants of the building's previous life, cast colored light onto the sidewalk, a small beauty in an otherwise stark landscape. Teresa slipped through the heavy wooden doors into the main hall, now partitioned into a check-in area, common space and cafeteria. The familiar smells greeted her: industrial cleaner, institutional cooking, and the indefinable scent of too many bodies in too little space. Yet compared to some shelters, Grace Haven was a blessing. Clean, well-organized, and staffed by people who still managed to summon kindness despite the overwhelming need they faced daily. "Evening, Miss Martin," called Dorothy from the intake. Desk, a stout woman with cropped silver hair and reading glasses perpetually perched on the end of her nose. "Lily's in the homework corner with Ms. Paula. Said she's got a big test tomorrow she's studying for." Teresa smiled gratefully. "Thanks, Dorothy. Any beds tonight?" The older woman consulted her clipboard, lips pursed. "It's tight. We've got that family of 4 that came in yesterday taking up the last private room. But I saved you and Lily your usual corner spots in the women's dormitory." "We appreciate it," Teresa said sincerely. The corner spots offered a semblance of privacy, 2 cots pushed against the wall with a portable screen that could be positioned to create a tiny temporary room. Dorothy waved away the thanks. "That girl of yours is helping Ms. Paula organize the book donations. Never seen a child so careful with sorting. Says she's making sure all the series books stay together because it's a crime to separate a story in the middle." She chuckled. Wonder where she gets such notions. Pride bloomed, warm in Teresa's chest. She's always loved books. Even before she could read, she would memorize stories and pretend to read them to her stuffed animals. "Apple doesn't fall far, I guess," Dorothy replied with a knowing look. "You heading back to the Jobs Resource Center tomorrow?" "I heard. They might have some clerical positions opening up at the hospital." Teresa hesitated, her hand instinctively touching the pocket where Kevin's business card rested. "Actually, I might have something else lined up." Dorothy's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Well now, that's good news. Want to share?" "Not yet," Teresa said carefully. "I don't want to jinx it." But if it works out— She stopped, unable to articulate the magnitude of what it would mean, fearful that speaking it aloud might somehow make it disappear. "I understand," Dorothy nodded, "but I'm pulling for you, Miss Martin. You and Lily deserve a break." Teresa thanked her again and made her way toward the homework corner, a small alcove furnished with mismatched tables and chairs, walls decorated with colorful educational posters. The sound of her daughter's voice reached her before she turned the corner. "If you put the fantasy books by the same author together, kids can find the whole series easier," Lily was explaining to an elderly volunteer. "Like all the Narnia books should be together, not spread out." "That makes good sense," the volunteer, presumably Ms. Paula, agreed. "You've got a real librarian's mind, young lady." Teresa paused, watching unseen as her daughter carefully arranged a stack of dog-eared paperbacks. At 9, Lily was all gangly limbs and determined chin, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, secured with a once colorful elastic that had long ago faded to a nondescript gray. Despite everything, she had maintained a certain brightness, a quality that drew people to her, that made volunteers slip her extra cookies or save the newest book donations for her to see first. Lily looked up then, catching sight of her mother. Her face broke into a radiant smile that transformed her from merely pretty to breathtaking. "Mama!" she exclaimed, abandoning her book sorting to rush across the room. "You're early. Did you get the rice? Ms. Paula said we can use the microwave in the staff room if we need to cook something." Teresa embraced her daughter, breathing, in the scent of school soap and the cheap shampoo provided by the shelter. "Yes, sweetie, I got the rice, and guess what? I found some change left over. Maybe enough for an apple to share for dessert." Lily's eyes widened at this unexpected luxury. A real apple, not the mushy ones from the donation box. "A real crisp apple," Teresa confirmed, her heart simultaneously swelling with love, and aching at how such a simple pleasure had become cause for celebration. "Ms. Paula has been teaching me about library science," Lily continued, leading her mother by the hand back to the book-covered table. "Did you know that real libraries have a whole system for organizing books? It's called the Dewey Decimal System. Ms. Paula used to be a school librarian before she retired." The elderly volunteer smiled, her face a map of gentle wrinkles. "Your daughter has a gift for organization, Ms. Martin, and her reading level— Well, I was a librarian for 40 years, and I've rarely seen a child her age tackle such advanced material with such comprehension." Pride momentarily overshadowed Teresa's constant worry. "She's always been an advanced reader, even when—" She stopped, not wanting to dwell on the before times, when Lily had her own bookshelf in her own bedroom in their own apartment. Ms. Paula seemed to understand. With the tact of someone who had witnessed many families in transition, she simply nodded and said, "Well, she's been a tremendous help today. We've gotten through sorting 4 boxes of donations, haven't we, Lily?" The girl beamed, then turned to her mother with barely contained excitement. "And Ms. Paula says I can pick 1 book to keep, my very own. I've narrowed it down to 3. Choices, but it's so hard to decide." Teresa felt her throat tighten with emotion. Once Lily had owned dozens of books. Now the prospect of having just 1 to call her own produced this level of joy. The resilience of children was both a blessing and a heartbreak. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she managed. "Why don't you show me your choices while I start making our dinner?" Together they walked to the common area, Lily chattering about the relative merits of each book candidate, while Teresa nodded and asked questions, her mind still partially occupied with thoughts of tomorrow's meeting at Lakeside Publishing. Should she tell Lily tonight, or wait until after the meeting, when she'd know if the opportunity was real? The decision was made for her when they reached the small kitchenette area where residents could prepare simple meals. As Teresa measured rice into a borrowed bowl, Lily suddenly grew quiet, her expression serious in a way that no 9-year-olds should be. "Mama," she said in a low voice, "Tommy Wilson at school said his mum saw us coming out of the shelter. Last week, he said we're homeless." Teresa's hands stilled. They'd had versions of this conversation before, but each time it arose, the pain was fresh. "Tommy Wilson should mind his own business," she replied, trying to keep her tone light. "We've talked about this, Lilybug. We're not homeless, we're between homes, this is temporary. Lily fiddled with the corner of a book, her eyes downcast. That's what you said 3 months ago. The simple truth of this observation struck Teresa like a physical blow. She set down the measuring cup and knelt to meet her daughter's eyes. "You're right," she admitted. "It's been longer than I thought it would be, and I'm so sorry for that." Lily looked up, her brown eyes, so like her father's, filled with a wisdom beyond her years. "It's not your fault Daddy got sick, and it's not your fault the school didn't need as many teachers." Teresa gathered her daughter close, overwhelmed by the child's capacity for understanding. "No, it's not. But it is my responsibility to take care of you, to find us a proper home again. And Lily," she pulled back slightly, meeting her daughter's gaze, "I think that might happen sooner than we thought." Interest sparked in Lily's expression. "Really? Did you find a job?" "Maybe," Teresa said cautiously. "I met someone today, someone who knew me from before. He's offered me a position that would pay enough for an apartment, a real one, not just a room." "With our own bathroom?" Lily asked, hope making her voice breathless. "With our own bathroom," Teresa confirmed, allowing herself to share in the fantasy of privacy, of door locks, of not carrying toiletries in a plastic caddy to and from communal showers. "When do you start? Can I have my own room? Could we get a bookshelf again?" The questions tumbled out, and Teresa held up a hand to stem the tide. "Slow down, sweetie. I have a meeting tomorrow to discuss the details. I need to make sure it's real before we start planning." Lily's expression sobered. "It is real, isn't it, Mama? Not like the time the restaurant said they'd hire you, but then they didn't." The memory of that disappointment, showing up for her first shift only to be told the position had been filled, stung afresh. "This feels different," Teresa said honestly, "but we should be careful with our hopes just in case." Lily nodded sagely, then brightened. "If you get the job, can we get ice cream to celebrate? Real ice cream, not just the freezer-burned stuff from the donation box." Teresa laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuineness. "If I get this job, we'll get the biggest ice cream, sundaes we can find. With whipped cream, and cherries, and chocolate sauce. All of it," Teresa promised, her heart lifting at her daughter's simple desires. "The works." Lily's smile could have illuminated the entire shelter. "Then no, you'll get it, Mama. You're the smartest, nicest, best person ever. They'd be stupid not to hire you." As they settled at a corner table with their small meal of rice mixed with the last packet of soy sauce Teresa had salvaged from a previous fast food visit, Lily continued making plans for their future apartment, plans that grew increasingly elaborate with each bite. "We could paint my room purple," she suggested between mouthfuls, "and maybe get a cat, not a big cat, just a little one that doesn't eat much." Teresa listened, allowing herself to be carried along on the current of her daughter's optimism. For this moment, as the evening light filtered through stained glass windows onto their humble meal, she permitted herself to believe that Kevin's offer might be the turning point they'd been waiting for. That perhaps life, having taken so much from them piece by piece, was finally ready to give something back. The next morning dawned clear and cool, sunlight streaming through the high windows of Grace Haven's dormitory. Teresa had barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities and anxieties about the meeting at Lakeside Publishing. She'd washed her hair in the shelter's shower using a small amount of the floral-scented shampoo another resident had shared. Her clothes, the least worn of her meager wardrobe, had been carefully hand-washed in the sink and hung to dry overnight. Standing before the spotted mirror in the communal bathroom, Teresa assessed her appearance with critical eyes. The dark circles beneath her eyes had faded somewhat with the application of a concealer sample another shelter resident had given her. Her graying brown hair, once stylishly cut, now hung limply past her shoulders, trimmed irregularly by her own inexpert hand. She'd twisted it into a simple knot at the nape of her neck, professional or at least attempting to be. Her outfit was the best she could manage, a faded navy blouse with only 2 nearly invisible stains, black pants that hung too loosely on her frame but weren't visibly worn at the knees, and her only pair of shoes, practical walking shoes that had once been white but were now a stubborn grey despite her best efforts with shelter soap and a toothbrush. "How you look pretty, Mama," Lily said from behind her, already dressed in her school uniform, a white polo shirt and navy skirt that the school's assistance program had provided. Teresa turned, smiling at her daughter's reassurance. "Thank you. Sweetie, I'm trying to look professional." "You look like a boss," Lily declared with firm conviction, "like Principal Jenkins except nicer." Warmth bloomed in Teresa's chest at the comparison to Lily's formidable school principal. "From you, that's high praise indeed." They made their way to the cafeteria for a quick breakfast, instant oatmeal and slightly bruised bananas, before Teresa walked Lily to her school bus stop. The morning routine was so familiar now, but today felt different. Today there was a thread of possibility woven through the fabric of their usual struggles. "Remember, I'll pick you up after school," Teresa reminded her daughter as the yellow bus approached. "We're going to visit the place where I might work." Lily's eyes widened with excitement. "Can I tell Miss Patterson? She always asks if we've found an apartment yet." Teresa hesitated, then nodded. "You can tell her I have a job interview, but let's wait on sharing more until we know for sure, okay?" Lily threw her arms around her mother's waist in a fierce hug. "You'll get it, Mama. I know you will." With those words of absolute faith ringing in her ears, Teresa watched her daughter board the school bus, then turned toward downtown and Lakeside Publishing. The walk took nearly an hour, but Teresa had deliberately left early, allowing time to compose herself before the meeting. As the neighborhoods gradually transformed from worn storefronts and check-cashing establishments to gleaming office buildings and artisanal coffee shops, she felt increasingly out of place. Workers in business attire streamed past her, carrying expensive coffees and staring at smartphones, occupied with lives so different from her own that they might as well exist in parallel universes. Lakeside Publishing occupied a renovated warehouse in the city's revitalized Riverside district. The building blended historic industrial elements with modern design, exposed brick walls and original timber beams, contrasting with walls of glass and sleek steel accents. The company logo, a stylized open book with waves beneath it, was mounted above glass entry doors. Teresa's steps slowed as she approached, intimidation washing over her. What was she doing here? This world of publishing executives and corporate foundations seemed as distant from her current reality as the moon. Kevin's words from yesterday echoed in her mind. Life takes away, sometimes piece by piece, but sometimes, rarely but sometimes, it gives back all at once. She squared her shoulders, checked her reflection one last time in the mirrored surface of a nearby building, and pushed through the revolving door into Lakeside Publishing's lobby. The interior was bright and airy, with comfortable seating. Areas arranged around a central reception desk. Books published by the company were displayed on wooden shelves, their colorful spines creating a rainbow effect against the white walls. A security guard stationed near the elevators looked up as she entered. "Good morning," Teresa said, approaching the reception desk where a young woman with a sleek bob haircut was typing rapidly on a keyboard. "My name is Teresa Martin. I have an appointment with Kevin Brown at 9 o'clock. The receptionist glanced up, her eyes performing a quick assessment of Teresa's appearance. If she noticed the worn clothing or the anxious tension in Teresa's posture, she gave no indication. "Mr. Brown mentioned you'd be coming," she said with professional courtesy. "He asked that you be shown to the conference room when you arrived. He's finishing up a call and will join you shortly." She stood, gesturing toward the security desk. "If you'll just sign in, I'll show you the way." Teresa followed the instructions, trying to ignore the flutter of nerves in her stomach as she scrawled her name in the visitor log. The security guard issued her a temporary badge, which she clipped to her blouse. "This way, please," the receptionist said, leading her to an elevator. They rode in silence to the third floor, emerging into a hallway lined with office doors. Through glass walls, Teresa caught glimpses of the publishing house at work. Editors bent over manuscripts, designers studying computer screens, small groups gathered around conference tables. The conference room was at the end of the hall, a medium-sized space with a polished table surrounded by comfortable chairs. One wall was entirely glass, offering a stunning view of the river below. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" the receptionist asked. Water would be wonderful, thank you, Teresa replied, trying to sound as if she belonged in this pristine professional environment rather than someone who had slept on a shelter cot just hours before. Left alone in the conference room, Teresa fought the urge to pace. Instead, she stood by the window, watching boats navigate the river below. So much had changed in her life, yet the world had continued turning, business as usual for those untouched by personal tragedy. Mrs. Martin. The voice startled her from her thoughts. She turned to find Kevin standing in the doorway, smiling warmly. Today he wore a blue shirt that brought out the warmth in his brown eyes, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms covered in colorful tattoos, an unexpected touch of artistic expression in his otherwise conventional appearance. "Please, call me Teresa," she said, extending her hand. The handshake they exchanged felt symbolic somehow, a bridge between her past and a possible future. "Thank you for coming," Kevin said, gesturing toward the conference table. "I was worried you might change your mind." Teresa settled into one of the ergonomic chairs, trying not to marvel at its comfort compared to the plastic folding chairs at the shelter. "I almost did," she admitted. "This all feels surreal." Kevin nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I can imagine, but I meant every word I said yesterday. This isn't charity, Teresa. This is opportunity, one you've earned." A knock at the door interrupted them as the receptionist returned with water for Teresa and a steaming mug of coffee for Kevin. When they were alone again, Kevin opened a folder he'd brought with him. "I stayed late last night drafting a job description," he explained, sliding a document across the table. "It's essentially what we discussed, coordinating our Reading Futures initiative, establishing literacy programs in shelters and community centers throughout the city, selecting appropriate books for different age groups, and training volunteer readers." Teresa scanned the document, her heart accelerating with each bullet point. It was perfect, a fusion of her teaching background and her intimate knowledge of shelter life, a position where her recent experiences would be an asset rather than a liability. "The salary is, as I mentioned," Kevin continued, "with health benefits after 90 days. We also offer a matched 401k after 6 months, and there's a stipend for professional development. Professional development, health insurance, retirement savings, concepts that had become abstract luxuries in Teresa's world of immediate survival needs. "This sounds," she began, struggling to find words adequate to express what this opportunity meant. "Before you answer," Kevin interjected gently, "I want to be completely transparent. The Foundation Board will need to approve the hire, which is standard procedure. But as program director, my recommendation carries significant weight." Teresa nodded, tempering her hope with realism. "When would the board meet?" "Friday," Kevin replied. 3 days from now." "And if they approve, when would I start?" "Immediately. Monday, if that works for you." His expression grew hesitant. "Which brings me to another matter. Housing." Teresa's fingers tightened around the water glass. This was the catch, the moment when reality would reassert itself. "The Foundation has an emergency assistance fund," Kevin explained. "Normally it's used for employees facing unexpected hardship, but the board has approved its use in this case to provide 3 months of temporary housing while you get established. There's a corporate apartment building 2 blocks from here, where we put up visiting authors and executives. It's furnished with utilities included." The glass nearly slipped from Teresa's grasp. "An apartment? For Lily and me?" Kevin nodded. 2 bedrooms, nothing fancy but clean and convenient to both our office and Lily's school. "The idea is to give you breathing room to find permanent housing once you've saved some money." Teresa set the glass down carefully, afraid her trembling hands might drop it. "Kevin, I don't know what to say. This is beyond anything I could have hoped for." "Say you'll accept," he replied simply. "Pending board approval, of course." "Yes," Teresa breathed, the word carrying the weight of months of struggle, of prayers whispered into darkness, of promises made to Lily that she'd feared were empty. "Yes, I accept." Kevin's smile was brilliant. "Excellent. Now let's talk logistics. I've prepared some initial paperwork." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of forms, program details, and preliminary planning. Kevin's enthusiasm was contagious, and Teresa found herself offering ideas born from her unique perspective, suggestions for making reading programs more accessible to families in crisis, strategies for creating safe, welcoming spaces within, shelter environments, techniques for connecting with children whose lives were in turmoil. By the time they finished, it was nearly noon. Kevin checked his watch. "When does Lily get out of school?" 3:30, Teresa replied, gathering the copies of paperwork Kevin had provided for her to review. "Perfect. I'd like you to see the Reading Futures space before you leave. It's on the 5th floor. Would you join me for lunch afterward? There's a decent cafe in the building." Teresa's instinct was to refuse, to conserve the little money she had. But then she remembered that this might truly be the beginning of a new chapter. A lunch, a simple luxury that had been out of reach for so long, suddenly seemed like an appropriate celebration. "I'd like that," she said. The Reading Futures space occupied half of the 5th floor, an open area with comfortable reading nooks, low bookshelves, and colourful beanbag chairs scattered about. Natural light flooded through skylights, illuminating walls decorated with quotes about reading and framed illustrations from children's books. "It's beautiful," Teresa murmured, running her hands along a shelf stocked with brand-new books. "But empty." "That's the challenge," Kevin admitted. "We built the space, but we haven't yet connected with the community in a meaningful way. Our previous coordinator was good at administrative tasks, but lacked the personal experience to truly understand what these programs need to be successful." Teresa nodded, already envisioning possibilities. Weekend reading retreats for shelter families, book clubs for parents trying to maintain connections with their children despite difficult circumstances, storytelling workshops where people could share their own narratives. "Children need stories more than ever when life becomes uncertain," she said softly. "Books are portable worlds. No matter where you sleep at night, you can return to the same story, find the same characters waiting for you." Kevin watched her, with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. That understanding. That passion." He gestured around the empty space. "This could change lives, Teresa, just like you changed mine." The simple statement, delivered without drama or embellishment, struck Teresa silent. In the depths of her struggle, she'd forgotten that her previous work had mattered, that the stories she'd shared had rippled outward in ways she couldn't see. "I never knew," she said finally. "At the shelter, I read the books. I didn't know if it made any difference." "It made all the difference," Kevin replied quietly. "To me, to others." Lunch at the cafe was simple but delicious. Fresh sandwiches, crisp salad, and for dessert, the first piece of chocolate cake Teresa had tasted in nearly a year. Kevin shared stories of his journey from the shelter to college on scholarship, his early career in journalism, and eventually his transition to publishing. "My first book was a collection of stories from shelter youth," he explained, finishing his coffee. "It wasn't a bestseller, but it opened doors, made people listen." "I'd like to read it," Teresa said. Kevin smiled. "I'll bring you a copy on Monday, assuming everything goes as planned with the board." "And if it doesn't?" The question escaped before Teresa could stop it, her persistent fear that this opportunity would dissolve like so many others. Kevin's expression grew serious. "Then I'll find another way. I believe in second chances, Teresa. I believe in completing the circle. What you gave freely to others should come back to you when you need it most." Teresa checked her watch, reluctant to end this interlude, but aware that she needed to meet Lily's school bus. "I should go. My daughter—" "Of course," Kevin nodded. "Bring her back here after school. I'd like to meet her, show her the reading room." As they rode the elevator down to the lobby, Teresa felt a curious lightness, as if layers of worry had been temporarily lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she walked with her head held high, not from pride, but from the simple dignity of being treated as a person of value. The spring afternoon had warmed considerably, golden sunlight bathing the city streets. Teresa walked to Lily's school with a buoyancy in her step that drew curious glances from passers-by. At the school gates, she found herself standing straighter, less concerned with the judgment of other parents as they waited for the dismissal bell. When Lily emerged from the building, her face lit up at the sight of her mother. She ran across the schoolyard, backpack bouncing against her slim frame. "Mama, how did it go? Did you get the job? Can we get ice cream?" Teresa laughed, embracing her daughter. "It went well, sweetie, very well. The job isn't officially mine yet. Some people have to approve it on Friday, but Mr. Brown seems confident." "I told you," Lily declared triumphantly. "I knew they'd want you. You're the best at everything." "Not everything," Teresa demurred, smoothing her daughter's wind-blown hair. "But maybe the right person for this particular job. And guess what? Mr. Brown wants to meet you. He's invited us back to see the place where I'd be working." Lily's eyes widened with excitement. "Can we go right now?" "That's the plan. It's about a 30-minute walk. Think your legs can handle it?" "Race you," Lily called, already dashing ahead. Teresa hurried after her, marveling at her daughter's resilience. Despite everything they'd endured, Lily had somehow maintained her essential spark, her capacity for joy, for excitement, for belief in possibilities. When they arrived at Lakeside Publishing, Lily grew suddenly shy, pressing close to her mother's side as they approached the imposing building. "Ain't so fancy," she whispered, eyeing the security guard and receptionist with apprehension. "It's just a place where people make books," Teresa reassured her. "And the man we're meeting, Mr. Brown, he was once a child in a shelter, just like we are now." This revelation visibly relaxed Lily. "Really? And now he works here?" "He's one of the bosses," Teresa confirmed, "which just goes to show that where you are right now isn't necessarily where you'll always be." The receptionist, a different young woman from the morning shift, smiled warmly at Lily. "You must be Ms. Martin's daughter. Mr. Brown asked me to let him know when you arrived." Within moments, Kevin appeared in the lobby, his face breaking into a genuine smile at the sight of Lily. He approached with careful casualness, intuitive enough to recognize a child's potential wariness of strangers. "You must be the famous Lily I've heard so much about," he said, crouching slightly to meet her at eye level. "Your mom tells me you're quite the book expert." Lily studied him solemnly before replying, "I like stories, especially ones where people overcome difficult things." Kevin's eyes flickered briefly to Teresa before returning to Lily. "Those are my favorite kind too. Would you like to see our special reading room? It's got some pretty amazing books, but it's missing something important." "What?" Lily asked, curiosity overcoming shyness. "Children to enjoy them," Kevin replied simply. "Would you be willing to give me your expert opinion on our collection? Tell me what's missing." Lily nodded, visibly warming to this adult who spoke to her as if her opinions mattered. "I can do that. I've read a lot of books." "I bet you have," Kevin said, straightening. "Shall we?" The three of them rode the elevator to the 5th floor, Kevin engaging Lily in conversation about her favorite books and authors. Teresa watched in quiet amazement as her daughter grew increasingly animated, detailing the plot of her current favorite series with passionate hand gestures. When they reached the Reading Futures space, Lily's reaction was everything Kevin could have hoped for. She gasped audibly, eyes wide with wonder as she took in the colorful, book-filled environment. "Can I?" She hesitated, looking to her mother for permission. "Go explore," Teresa encouraged her. "That's what it's for." For the next hour, Lily moved from shelf to shelf, examining titles, occasionally pulling out a book to flip through its pages, her expression serious as she mentally catalogued the collection. Occasionally she would make pronouncements about what was missing. "You need more graphic novels for older kids," or "Where are the poetry books?" which Kevin dutifully noted on his phone. The sunlight gradually shifted to the golden hue of late afternoon as Lily curled up in a window seat with a stack of selected books. Teresa and Kevin sat at a small table nearby, discussing program ideas in quiet tones. "She's remarkable," Kevin observed, watching Lily completely absorbed in her reading. "So poised, so articulate. She's had to grow up faster than I would have wished," Teresa admitted. "But books have been her constant companions through everything. Even when we had to leave most of our possessions behind, she insisted on bringing her favorite stories." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the sound of Lily turning pages across the room. "Teresa," Kevin said finally, his voice serious. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you all day, but I wasn't sure how to bring it up." Teresa tensed, bracing herself for the other shoe to drop, for the revelation that would turn this dream back into her familiar nightmare. "The board meeting on Friday," he continued. "It's largely a formality. I spoke with the chair last night after we met. They've already given preliminary approval based on my recommendation." Teresa stared at him, processing his words. "You mean the job is yours," Kevin confirmed, a smile spreading across his face. "Officially. I wanted to wait until we had the final approval to tell you, but I couldn't keep it to myself any longer." The magnitude of the moment, the abrupt turn in her fortunes, overwhelmed Teresa. She pressed a hand to her mouth, unshed tears burning behind her eyes. "And the apartment?" she managed to ask. "Also approved. You and Lily can move in this weekend. I'll have the keys for you tomorrow." A sound escaped Teresa, half laugh, half sob. Across the room, Lily looked up from her book, eyes questioning. "We have a home, Lily," Teresa called, her voice breaking. "A real home. And Mama has a job." The book tumbled forgotten from Lily's lap as she rushed across the room, throwing herself into her mother's arms. "Really, really, truly, not maybe anymore." "Really, truly," Teresa confirmed, holding her daughter close. "Starting this weekend." Lily's joyful whoop echoed through the reading room. She broke free from her mother's embrace to execute an impromptu dance of celebration, her earlier shyness forgotten. "Does this mean we get ice cream now?" she asked, breathless with excitement. Kevin laughed. "I think this definitely calls for ice cream. The biggest sundaes we can find, if I'm not mistaken." Teresa looked at him in surprise. "You remember?" "I remember everything about our conversation yesterday," he replied quietly. "It was important." As they watched Lily resume her victory dance around the reading room, Kevin added, "You know, we offer childcare assistance as part of our benefits package. There's a summer program at the community center across the street. Lily might enjoy it while you're working." "She'd love that," Teresa said, imagining her daughter engaged in activities with other children instead of spending her days in shelters or tagging along to job interviews. "And when she's not in the program, she's welcome here any time," Kevin continued. "We encourage staff to bring their children to the reading room. It reminds us who we're ultimately working for." The word staff sent a thrill through Teresa. The realization that she would soon belong somewhere again, be part of something purposeful. No longer just a number at the food bank or a face to avoid on the street, but a professional with contributions to make. "I don't know how to thank you," she began, but Kevin shook his head. "Don't thank me," he said firmly. "This isn't a favor. It's an investment in the right person for an important job. The fact that it completes a circle that began 20 years ago in a shelter reading program, that's just the universe having a better imagination than we do." Lily bounded back to them, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Can I see our new apartment today, please?" "Not today, sweetheart," Teresa explained. "We'll get the keys this weekend, but soon we'll have our own place again. Our own rooms, our own bathroom. And a bookshelf," Lily pressed, returning to her constant refrain. Kevin's eyes lit up. "That reminds me. Wait here a moment." He disappeared through a door at the back of the reading room, returning minutes later with a small wooden bookshelf, about 3 feet tall and painted a cheerful yellow. "This was going to be discarded during our renovation," he explained, setting it down before Lily. "It's nothing special, but it's sturdy. Thought it might make a good start for your new collection." Lily approached the bookshelf with reverence, running her fingers along its painted surface. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you, Mr. Brown." "You're welcome, Lily. And please call me Kevin." He glanced at his watch. "Now, about that ice cream." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as they left Lakeside Publishing, the small yellow bookshelf tucked under Kevin's arm. They found an ice cream parlor 3 blocks away, its vintage decor and checkerboard floor creating an atmosphere of timeless cheer. 3 sundaes with everything, Kevin ordered at the counter. The works as promised. When the massive creations arrived, mountains of ice cream topped with whipped cream, cherries, nuts, and chocolate sauce, Lily's eyes grew round with disbelief. "Can I really eat all this?" she asked, spoon poised uncertainly above the towering dessert. Teresa laughed. "You can certainly try, sweetheart." As they ate their ice cream, Plans for the future flowed freely between them. Lily's detailed vision for decorating her new room, Teresa's ideas for the Reading Futures program, Kevin's suggestions for local schools and community centers that might benefit from their outreach. For the first time in months, Teresa allowed herself to think beyond the next meal, the next night's shelter, the next day's struggle. She permitted herself to envision a future where stability wasn't just a distant memory, but a present reality. When they finally left the ice cream shop, the evening had settled around them, streetlights flickering to life along the sidewalks. Kevin insisted on calling a taxi to take them back to Grace Haven. "Your last few nights there should at least be comfortable," he explained, pressing the fare into Teresa's hand despite her protests. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, Lily waved enthusiastically at Kevin through the rear window. "I like him," she declared once he was out of sight. "He talks to me like I'm a real person, not just a kid." "He understands," Teresa replied, thinking of the 12-year-old boy who had once sat cross-legged on a shelter floor, finding escape in stories. "He's been where we are." Lily rested her head against her mother's shoulder, suddenly tired after the day's excitement. "Everything's going to be different now, isn't it, Mama?" Teresa stroked her daughter's hair, watching the city slide past the taxi windows. The same streets they had walked countless times in desperation, now transformed by the promise of tomorrow. "Yes, Lilybug," she murmured. "Everything's going to be different. But you know what won't change?" "What?" Lily asked sleepily. "How much I love you, how proud I am of you, how amazed I am by your strength through all of this." Lily yawned, her eyes drifting closed. "I get it from you, Mama." As the taxi wound its way back to Grace Haven, Teresa held her sleeping daughter close, overwhelmed with gratitude for this unexpected turn in their fortunes. Tomorrow, they would begin packing their few belongings. Tomorrow, they would say goodbye to the shelter that had been their temporary refuge. Tomorrow they would start again. But tonight, for the first time in months, Teresa would sleep without the weight of uncertainty pressing against her chest. Tonight, the promise of a bookshelf, empty now but waiting to be filled, was enough to sustain her hope in the future. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone from your past re-entered your life at precisely the right moment? Or do you know someone who has had a life-changing encounter like this? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. The weekend arrived with a flurry of activity. Friday morning found Teresa and Lily at Lakeside Publishing, where Kevin proudly presented them with keys to their temporary apartment and official confirmation of Teresa's employment. The apartment keys were attached to a small keychain shaped like an open book, a thoughtful touch that brought tears to Teresa's eyes. "The apartment is stocked with basics," Kevin explained as he helped carry their few belongings, mostly donated clothes and Lily's precious books, into the elevator of a sleek modern building just blocks from the publishing house. Nothing fancy, but enough to get you started. Nothing fancy, as it turned out, was relative. To Teresa and Lily, the two-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor seemed like a palace after months of shelter life. The furnishings were simple, but new. A comfortable sofa and armchair in the living room, a small dining table with 4 chairs, queen beds in each bedroom with fresh linens. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel appliances, and the bathroom featured a tub deep enough for proper soaking, a luxury Lily immediately identified as her favorite feature. "Look, Mama," she exclaimed, running from room to room. "Real towels, a television, a refrigerator just for us." Kevin leaned against the doorframe, watching with quiet satisfaction as Lily explored her new home. "The pantry and refrigerator are stocked with essentials. Nothing elaborate, but enough to get you through the first week without grocery shopping." Teresa opened the refrigerator to find milk, eggs, butter, fresh vegetables, and fruits, simple items that represented abundance after months of scarcity. The pantry contained pasta, rice, cereals, and canned goods, all neatly arranged on shelves. "This is too much," she murmured, overwhelmed by the generosity. "It's not charity," Kevin reminded her gently. "It's investment in a valued employee. The foundation covers this for any new hire relocating to the area." Still, Teresa knew this was special treatment, a compassionate bridging of the gap between her current circumstances and the stability that regular employment would eventually provide. The knowledge filled her with determination to prove herself worthy of this investment. "Where should I put this?" Kevin asked, holding up the yellow bookshelf. "My room," Lily called from down the hall. "By the window, please." As Kevin disappeared, to fulfill this request, Teresa found herself standing alone in the center of the kitchen, momentarily overwhelmed by the sudden shift in their fortunes. Just 1 week ago, she had been counting pennies for a bag of rice, uncertain where they would sleep that night. Now she stood in an apartment with her name on the lease, keys in her pocket, a refrigerator full of food, and a job waiting for her on Monday morning. The sound of laughter drifted from Lily's room, her daughter and Kevin discussing the optimal arrangement of books on the small yellow shelf. The normalcy of it struck Teresa like a physical sensation, the simple, everyday interaction that most people took for granted, but that had been absent from their lives for too long. Kevin emerged from the hallway smiling. "Lily's got quite the eye for design. She's arranging her books by color to create a rainbow effect." "She's been planning her ideal bookshelf for months," Teresa replied. "I just never thought—" Her voice trailed off, emotion closing her throat. Kevin seemed to understand. "It's a lot to process," he said simply. "Give yourself time to adjust." "I keep waiting to wake up," Teresa admitted, "for all of this to disappear like some cruel dream." "It's real," Kevin assured her. "You've worked hard to get here, Teresa. You deserve this second chance." After helping them settle in, Kevin excused himself, promising to check in over the weekend, and reminding Teresa that her official start time on Monday was 9 a.m. "The weekend is yours," he said at the door. "Rest, settle in. Monday will come soon enough." When the door closed behind him, Teresa and Lily stood in the entryway, looking at each other with a mixture of disbelief and joy. "Is this really ours, Mama?" Lily asked, her voice hushed as if speaking too loudly might cause their new reality to shatter. "For now," Teresa replied cautiously. "It's temporary, just for a few months while I save money for our own place. But yes, sweetheart, right now this is our home." Lily's face broke into a radiant smile. "Can I take a bubble bath? A real one with lots of bubbles?" Teresa laughed, the sound echoing in the apartment that was suddenly, miraculously, theirs. "Absolutely. Let's find those towels and run you the biggest bubble bath you've ever seen." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep in her own room, in her own bed, surrounded by her books arranged in rainbow order on the yellow shelf, Teresa stood at the living room window, gazing out at the city lights. The view from the 7th floor offered a perspective of the city she hadn't seen in months, elevated, expansive, filled with possibilities rather than threats. She thought of the rice she'd clutched so desperately in the grocery store, of the voice that had recognized her when she'd forgotten herself, of the stranger who had once been a child in her care and was now her unlikely rescuer, not through charity, but through recognition of her value, her capacity to contribute, to matter, to make a difference. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, learning to navigate a professional environment again after months of survival mode, adjusting to the rhythms of a working parent, balancing recovery from trauma with building a new future. But tonight, in this moment of quiet after the storm of hardship, Teresa allowed herself to simply be grateful. For second chances, for the power of stories to connect people across time and circumstance, for the resilience of her daughter, for the unexpected ways that life, having taken so much from them piece by piece, had finally begun to give something back. As the night deepened outside her window, Teresa made a silent promise to herself, to Lily, and to the children she would soon serve through the Reading Futures program. She would never forget what it felt like to be invisible, to be avoided, to be reduced to less than human. That knowledge, painful as it was, would inform every aspect of her work moving forward, ensuring that no child who entered her reading programs would ever feel less than valued, less than seen, less than worthy of stories that reflected their inherent dignity. In the bedroom down the hall, Lily shifted in her sleep, dreaming perhaps of the adventures that awaited in their new life. Teresa listened to the quiet sounds of their apartment, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of a wall clock, the occasional swoosh of traffic on the street below, the ordinary symphony of stability that she had once taken for granted. Now she recognized it for what it was, a precious gift, as fragile as it was essential. A foundation upon which to rebuild what had been lost and to create something new, something stronger, something wiser, something shaped by both suffering and joy. Turning from the window, Teresa moved through the darkened apartment to her own bedroom. For the first time in months, she would sleep without fear, without the vigilance required in shared shelter spaces, without the weight of uncertainty pressing against her chest. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges. But tonight, in this moment, it was enough to be home. Will Teresa manage to balance her new job responsibilities with rebuilding a stable life for herself and Lily? How will her experiences with homelessness shape her approach to the Reading Futures initiative? And what role will Kevin continue to play in their journey forward? Monday morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through windows that, wonderfully, belonged to a place Teresa could call home. She woke before her alarm, a lifetime of teacher's habits reasserting themselves after months of disruption. For a moment, she lay still, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the apartment building, the distant hum of the elevator, the muffled voices of neighbors preparing for their day, the gentle whoosh of the heating system activating in response to the morning chill. Normal sounds, safe sounds, the soundtrack of ordinary life that she had once taken for granted. She rose quietly, not wanting to wake Lily, who was still sleeping soundly in her own room. Another luxury after months of shared shelter spaces where privacy was non-existent and sleep was always light, always vigilant. In the kitchen, Teresa discovered the simple pleasure of making coffee in her own coffee maker, using mugs from cupboards that weren't shared with dozens of others. As the coffee brewed, she planned the day ahead. Wake Lily for school, walk her to the bus stop, just 3 blocks away according to the information Kevin had provided. Then to Lakeside Publishing for her first official day as Reading Futures coordinator. The thought sent a flutter of anxiety through her stomach. So much had changed so quickly. Just a week ago, she had been standing in a grocery store line, clutching a bag of rice, apologizing for her very existence. Now she was expected to step into a professional role, to lead a program, to represent a corporate foundation. Could she do it? Had her confidence been too deeply eroded by months of struggle? Would her colleagues see past her history to recognize her capabilities? The coffee machine beeped, interrupting her spiral of doubt. Teresa poured herself a cup, the familiar ritual steadying her nerves. One step at a time, she reminded herself. That's how they had survived the descent into homelessness. One day, one meal, one shelter, night at a time. And that's how they would navigate this ascent back to stability. One morning, one decision, one success at a time. By the time she woke Lily, Teresa had showered, dressed in her best outfit, still worn but clean, and prepared a simple breakfast of cereal and fresh fruit, a luxury that brought tears to her eyes as she arranged sliced bananas and strawberries on Lily's plate. "First day of our new life, Mama," Lily asked as she emerged from her bedroom, hair tousled from sleeping in a real bed. "First day," Teresa confirmed, smiling at her daughter's perceptiveness. "Are you ready?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I told Ms. Patterson we have an apartment now. She said she wants to hear all about it after school." The walk to the bus stop was buoyant with excitement, both of them still marveling at the novelty of leaving from their own front door, of having keys in their pockets, of knowing they had a specific place to return to at day's end. "Will Mr. Kevin be at your work today?" Lily asked as they waited for the school bus. "Yes, though I imagine he'll be busy with his own responsibilities," Teresa replied. "He's an important editor, remember." "He doesn't act important," Lily observed, not in a show-off way. "But he notices things like how I arranged my books, and he remembers stuff like how you promised me ice cream." "That's a good quality," Teresa agreed, touched by her daughter's astute observation. "Noticing things about other people instead of just thinking about yourself." "You notice things too, Mama," Lily said as the yellow school bus appeared at the corner. "That's why you'll be good at your new job." With those words of confidence ringing in her ears, Teresa watched her daughter board the bus, then turned toward Lakeside Publishing, her steps purposeful despite the anxiety churning. Beneath her professional demeanor, the security guard greeted her by name as she entered the lobby, presenting her with an employee badge that featured a photo Kevin must have arranged to have taken during their previous visits. The simple rectangle of plastic with her name and title printed beneath her image represented a powerful shift in status, from anonymous shelter resident to recognized professional with legitimate access to this space. Kevin was waiting for her at the elevator, his smile warm and encouraging. "Ready for day one?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Teresa replied honestly. "You'll be great," he assured her as they rode to the third floor. "The team is excited to meet." I may have talked you up a bit." "Oh no," Teresa groaned. "Setting expectations I can't possibly meet." Kevin laughed. "Just telling them the truth, that we've found someone who understands our mission from the inside out." Her new office was small but bright, with a window overlooking the river and walls painted a cheerful yellow that reminded her of Lily's. Bookshelf. A desktop computer, phone, and basic supplies were arranged neatly on the desk, alongside a small potted plant and a welcome card signed by the foundation staff. "The team meeting is at 10, Kevin explained, showing her how to log into the computer system. "I'll introduce you to everyone then. For now, take some time to settle in, review the program documents I emailed you, get your bearings." Left alone. In her new office, Teresa ran her fingers along the smooth surface of the desk, her desk, marveling at how quickly life could change course. The journey from the depths of despair to this moment of possibility had been breathtakingly swift, leaving her slightly dizzy with the velocity of transformation. The team meeting passed in a blur of new faces, policy discussions, and strategic planning. Teresa found herself speaking up more than she'd expected, offering insights based on her experiences, both as an educator and as someone who had navigated the shelter system. To her surprise, her colleagues listened with genuine interest, several taking notes when she described the practical barriers that prevented many shelter families from participating in enrichment programs. "Transportation is huge," she explained. "Many shelter residents don't have cars or money for public transit, and timing is critical. Programs need to work around shelter curfews and meal schedules." By the end of the meeting, Teresa had been tasked with developing an initial outreach plan for 3 local shelters, including Grace Haven. The irony wasn't lost on her, returning to the place where she had so recently been a resident, now in a professional capacity. But the perspective she had gained there would be invaluable in creating programs that truly served the needs of families in crisis. The day passed quickly, filled with orientation sessions, paperwork, and preliminary program planning. By 5 o'clock, Teresa was mentally exhausted but exhilarated. As she packed up her few belongings, a notepad filled with ideas, a company handbook, the small plant she'd been gifted, Kevin appeared in her doorway. "First day survival complete," he observed with a smile. "How are you feeling?" "Overwhelmed," Teresa admitted. "But in a good way. There's so much potential here, so many possibilities for reaching children who need these programs." "That's exactly why you're perfect for this role," Kevin replied. "You see the potential where others might only see problems." They walked together to the elevator, discussing Teresa's initial impressions and ideas. The easy camaraderie between them felt natural, as if the decades separating their first connection at the shelter had somehow compressed in this new context of shared purpose. "Lily's school bus arrives at 4:15, Teresa said, checking her watch. "I should hurry." "I'm heading that direction myself," Kevin offered. "Mind if I walk with you?" The spring afternoon was mild, cherry blossoms dotting the trees that lined the riverside walkway. As they walked, Kevin shared stories about his early days at Lakeside Publishing, his voice animated as he described the journey from entry-level editorial assistant to managing editor. "It wasn't always smooth," he admitted. "There were setbacks, moments when I doubted myself, times when I felt like an imposter who didn't belong in publishing." "Imposter syndrome," Teresa nodded. "I'm feeling a hefty dose of that today." "It's normal," Kevin assured her, "especially given your recent circumstances. But remember, your experiences are exactly what make you valuable to this program. You understand the reality of these families' lives in ways most professionals never will. They reached the bus stop just as Lily's school bus appeared at the corner. When she bounded down the steps and caught sight of her mother waiting with Kevin, her face lit up with surprise and delight. "Mr. Kevin, did you come to hear about my first day at school from our new apartment?" Kevin laughed at her directness. "I absolutely did. That and to see how your mum's first day went at her new job." The three of them walked back to the apartment building together, Lily chattering enthusiastically about how she'd told her teacher and friends about their new home, how she'd been assigned as reading buddy to a first grader, how the cafeteria had served her favorite lunch. "And nobody knows we were in a shelter before," she confided in a lower voice, "except Ms. Patterson. She gave me a journal to write about our transition, which is a fancy word for big changes in your life." Teresa exchanged a glance with Kevin over Lily's head, both touched by the child's resilience and the teacher's thoughtful response to their situation. At the apartment building entrance, Kevin bid them goodbye, promising to check in the next day at work. As they rode the elevator to their floor, Lily's excitement continued to bubble over. "Can we make dinner in our very own kitchen tonight? Can I help? Can we eat at the table like a real family?" "Yes to all of those questions," Teresa laughed, unlocking their door. "What shall we make with our actual refrigerator and real stove?" The evening passed in domestic harmony, Lily helping to prepare a simple pasta dinner, both of them still marveling at the luxury of cooking in their own kitchen, eating at their own table, washing dishes in their own sink. After dinner, they established what Lily dubbed their new home routine: homework at the dining table, followed by reading together on the sofa, and finally a bubble bath before bed. As Teresa tucked her daughter into bed, surrounded by carefully arranged books on the yellow shelf, Lily asked the question that had clearly been on her mind all day. "Mama, is Mr. Kevin going to be our new friend forever now?" Teresa considered the question carefully. "I think he'd like to be, yes. He's my boss at work, but he's also someone who cares about us." "Because you helped him when he was a kid." "Partly that," Teresa agreed, "but also because he's a good person who wants to help others the way he was once helped." Lily nodded, processing this. "I like having a friend who isn't just a kid at school, a grown-up friend who knows about before, but doesn't make us feel bad about it." The simple observation caught Teresa by surprise, the recognition that Kevin's greatest gift hadn't been the job or the apartment, but the dignity with which he had treated them both. "That's a very wise thought, Lilybug," she said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Now sleep tight in your very own bed. Tomorrow's another big day." After Lily had fallen asleep, Teresa sat at the small desk in her bedroom, making notes for the following day's work. Ideas for the Reading Futures program seemed to flow effortlessly now that the immediate pressures of survival had been lifted. Innovative approaches to engaging children in crisis, methods for making parents feel welcomed rather than judged, strategies for training volunteer readers. A text message from Kevin interrupted her planning. "Hope Day 1 ended well. Forgot to mention, Foundation Board wants to meet you at Friday's lunch meeting. Nothing to worry about. They're impressed with your initial ideas, just a formal welcome." Teresa smiled at the considerate warning. In her previous life, such a meeting would have been routine. Now, after months of being invisible to those in positions of power, the prospect of sitting at a table with the Foundation Board members triggered a flutter of anxiety. But she was changing day by day, hour by hour, reclaiming pieces of her former confidence, discovering new strengths forged in hardship. The woman who had stood in that grocery store line, apologizing for her existence, was already becoming someone new, someone who combined professional expertise with hard-earned wisdom about life's fragility and the power of human connection. The next morning established what would become their new routine: breakfast together at the small dining table, walking Lily to the bus stop, then continuing on to Lakeside Publishing, where Teresa's days quickly filled with program development, site visits to potential partner organizations, and collaborative planning with colleagues who increasingly sought her unique perspective. By Friday, when she sat nervously at the Foundation Board lunch meeting, Teresa had drafted a comprehensive 6-month plan for launching Reading Futures programs at 3 local shelters, including a detailed budget, staffing recommendations, and evaluation metrics. Ms. Martin's approach is revolutionary in its simplicity, Kevin explained to the board members, a group of well-dressed professionals with the polished appearance of people unacquainted with hardship. Rather than creating programs and then trying to convince shelter residents to participate, she's proposing we start by asking families what they need, what barriers prevent their participation, and what would make reading programs meaningful in their current circumstances. One board member, a silver-haired woman with keen eyes and an air of authority, turned to Teresa. "This approach comes from your personal experience, I understand." The question hung in the air. Teresa felt a momentary impulse to minimize her recent history, to disguise the truth of her circumstances. But something in Kevin's encouraging expression gave her courage to own her story. "Yes," she replied steadily. "Until very recently, my daughter and I were shelter residents ourselves. That experience taught me that even the most well-intentioned programs often fail because they don't address the practical realities of lives in crisis." She went on to explain how shelter curfews, meal schedules, lack of transportation, and the constant stress of uncertainty created barriers that standard program models didn't accommodate. "What families in shelters need isn't just books," she concluded. "They need dignity, recognition that their current circumstances don't define their capabilities or worth. Stories offer that dignity, that temporary escape into worlds where anything is possible, where children can see themselves as heroes rather than victims." When she finished speaking, the room was silent for a moment. Then the silver-haired woman nodded slowly. "Kevin was right about you," she said simply. "Your proposal is approved. Whatever resources you need to make this work, within reason, of course, you'll have them." The remainder of the meeting passed in a blur of congratulations and operational details. When it concluded, Kevin found Teresa in the hallway, her expression dazed. "You were brilliant," he said quietly. "Patricia doesn't impress easily, but you had her from the moment you spoke about dignity." "I can't believe they approved everything," Teresa replied, still processing what had happened. "The transportation vouchers, the meal provisions, the flexible scheduling, all of it." "Because you made them understand why it matters," Kevin explained. "That's what's been missing all along, someone who truly gets it." As they walked back toward their offices, Teresa's phone buzzed with a text message from Lily's teacher. "Lily presented her My New Home project today. The whole class was captivated by her story of transition. She spoke about your strength with such pride. Thought you should know." Tears pricked behind Teresa's eyes as she showed the message to Kevin. "She's extraordinary," he said softly. "You both are." "We're survivors," Teresa corrected him. "And now hopefully more than that." The weeks that followed established a rhythm to their new life. Work and school days punctuated by evening walks along the river, weekend excursions to libraries, and parks gradually expanding their world beyond the narrow focus of mere survival. Lily flourished, her natural brightness no longer dimmed by uncertainty, her academic performance soaring now that she had stable housing and regular meals. Teresa's Reading Futures program launched at Grace Haven first, a symbolic choice that wasn't lost on the shelter staff, who had known her as a resident just months before. Dorothy, the intake coordinator, had tears in her eyes at the opening session. "Full circle," she whispered to Teresa, as children gathered eagerly around volunteer. "Readers, you're showing them it's possible to come back from the edge." The program expanded to 2 additional shelters within the first month, each adaptation incorporating lessons learned and feedback from participants. Kevin attended every launch, quietly observing from the background, his presence a steady reminder of how one connection, one recognition, had altered the trajectory of so many lives. 3 months after Teresa's first day at Lakeside Publishing, as their temporary housing arrangement neared its end, she signed a lease on a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a family-friendly neighborhood near Lily's school. The monthly rent was manageable on her salary, especially with the careful budgeting habits she'd developed through hardship. Kevin helped them move in on a Saturday morning, along with 2 younger editors from the publishing house who had become friends with Teresa through their work together. "It's smaller than the corporate apartment," Teresa apologized as they carried boxes into the sunny living room. But it's ours, Lily corrected her, already directing the placement of their few possessions with the authority of a seasoned interior designer. Really truly ours, not temporary. The yellow bookshelf had expanded to 3 bookcases now, filled, with volumes donated by Lakeside staff and purchased with Teresa's first few paychecks. Lily's room was painted the purple she had dreamed of during shelter days, and yes, there was even a small grey cat named Story, adopted from the local animal shelter, who observed the moving process with aloof curiosity from atop a stack of boxes. When the last box had been carried in and pizza ordered to feed the helpful crew, Kevin presented them with a housewarming gift, a large framed photograph of Lily reading to younger children at the Grace Haven program launch, her expression animated as she shared a story with those still experiencing what she had so recently escaped. "To remind you both of the difference you're making," he said simply. Teresa hung the photograph in the living room, where it served as a daily reminder of their journey, not just from homelessness to housing, but from invisibility to purpose, from shame to dignity, from isolation to community. That evening, after the helpers had departed and Lily had fallen asleep in her purple bedroom, Teresa sat in the small balcony of their new apartment, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. Story, the cat, curled in her lap, purring contentedly, as she stroked his soft fur. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Kevin, "Just checking that you're both settling in okay." Still can't believe it's only been 3 months since that day in the grocery store. Life can change so quickly, sometimes for the worse, but sometimes, if we're lucky, for the better. Teresa typed her reply. "We're more than okay. We're home. Thank you for seeing me that day, not just my circumstances, but me." His response came quickly. "I recognized your voice first. You gave me stories when I needed them most. I'm just grateful I could return the favor." As the night deepened around her, Teresa reflected on the power of that recognition, of being truly seen by another human being at her lowest moment. How that single connection had rippled outward, touching not just her life and Lily's, but the lives of countless children now benefiting from the Reading Futures program. The woman who had stood in that grocery line apologizing for her very existence was gone now, transformed not just by improved circumstances, but by the profound experience of having moved through invisibility to recognition, through shame to purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The work of rebuilding a life was never truly finished. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, Teresa allowed herself to simply be grateful for second chances, for the resilience of the human spirit, and for the unexpected ways that life, having taken so much from her piece by piece, had finally given back in abundance. And when she finally went to bed in her new apartment, in her own room, with her daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall and a rescued cat curled at her feet, Teresa fell asleep without fear, without shame, without the weight of uncertainty pressing against her chest. She fell asleep with hope. Congratulations. Type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.